Joe Hortiz met with the media yesterday, and he had a lot of really interesting stuff to say about the 5th overall pick, about trades in season and during the draft, and also about the Keenan Allen trade that just happened. And that one was really interesting because there's a little bit of conflicting information, but I'm going to try to get to the bottom of it. So make sure to like and subscribe if you do enjoy this content, bro. It helps me out so much. And let's just go ahead and start out with this Keenan Allen trade. So Joe Hortiz starts off by saying, yeah, he's a very talented player. He respects him a lot. And this was a very difficult decision to make the trade and get Keenan Allen off of this Chargers team when he's been one of the team's best receivers in its history. And Joe Hortiz said that he approached Keenan Allen and his representation with multiple different options and just none of them worked out. I mean, it sounds like Joe Hortiz was trying to pull up every single trick that he could possibly do in order to keep Keenan Allen on this team in a, viable pay range. But that's the key there, because the pay was where it just did not come to terms. And I found this tweet. This is one of Keenan Allen's representations. He said only one offer was made, and it was a pay cut for 2024 with a 2-year extension, and both years had even deeper cuts to his current pay. They made a counter offer and it was rejected. So obviously they really did not want to pay a wide receiver over the age of 30. This is what I'm thinking. They didn't want to pay an older wide receiver a bunch of money like Keenan Allen. Probably deserves to be paid, man. I don't think he's totally within his right to not take that pay cut. But this is about the roster building strategy that Joe Hortiz has. Wide receiver is a premier position. I think they want to get bigger and faster. They want to be really physical. Keenan Allen, he's an older wide receiver. He's a really great route runner. He's not a big guy. He's not really fast, really physical. And I just think that's the direction that they want to go. And also, they're going over a huge youth movement right now. And they still need to add a ton of talent to that wide receiver room because, Quentin Johnston might be wide receiver 1 right now. And he says, we are not done building that room out. So we're going to look to continue to add pieces to that room. Listen, with free agency, I've been saying for a while now that there's really no good free agent wide receiver on the market that fits that sweet spot of still being young and having what they want at that position. Size, explosiveness, speed. They want to get some really good athletes at wide receiver. But this is definitely good news to hear, is that, he understands that this wide receiver room, it does need help. And obviously, this is something that I was saying earlier in the week. He knows that. He's waiting to address it until the draft. Now, does this mean he's going to draft Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5th overall? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that he sees this as a weakness on this team, and he will address it at some point in the draft. Remember, he values every single draft pick highly. And so with this trade, not only did he gain an extra 4th round pick, but he also got a lot of flexibility when it comes to the cap. Because here, this is a great quote. I know in the past there haven't been a lot of additions during the season with trades, but that's something I believe in. If you have a chance to trade for a good player mid-season that helps your team win this year, and you can potentially extend him and create value for going forward, that's very important. I think you have to give yourself that flexibility going forward. This is a good sign to me that he's not going to be spending big in free agency this period, and he's going to wait and push that money towards the season in case something comes up. Like, let's say a guy like Keenan Allen is on the trade market at week 6 because some team is not doing well and they're trying to sell their players. You could give a 4th round pick and you have that money to spend because you don't have 20 or 30 million tied up to Keenan Allen, and you just got yourself an extra 4th round pick. Obviously they're going to use that 4th round pick, but you could spend a 4th round pick for your next year's draft in order to get a really good player like that. You need to have that flexibility. This is something that the Ravens would do all the time, and it usually worked really well for them. Obviously sometimes it's not going to work out, but it's a great idea to do this, especially for players that are on their last year of their contract, because then you have the flexibility to re-sign those guys after the season, depending on how they played, or you can let them walk in free agency and then you get the comp pick for whatever team he signs for. So basically, you're trading away whatever pick. Say you trade away a 5th round pick to get this guy mid-season, and then he plays well for you during the season, and then you let him walk in free agency for a bunch of money. Some team pays him big because he played well for you. then you get a 5th comp pick to you. I mean, this is just that's amazing team building strategy that I love that Joe Hortiz is really wanting to make in-season trades, because then you have that amazing flexibility of letting guys walk for comp picks or re-signing them. And speaking of bringing players back, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, they both restructured their contracts, and Joe Hortiz knew that he was not going to be able to keep all 4 of those big name players. And he said this: the reality of it is, given the cap and the situation that we're in, the likelihood of all 4 players coming back and us being able to build depth and be a complete team, that was not a realistic end result. We were going to have to make moves, and we weren't locked into any 2 players throughout the process. So this basically confirms to me, because I did have a little thought here that, you know, it's interesting that they did not keep the 2 wide receivers, but they kept the 2 edge players. I think that's just a coincidence, because Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack were the ones that were willing to restructure. And I mean, the Mike Williams cut, that was kind of like a foregone conclusion. We all expected that move to happen. But if you told Chargers fans that there were only going to be 2 players from those big 4 that were going to stay on this team, I'm sure almost everyone would have said Keenan Allen and then one of those edge players. And so there is a thought that, like, okay, well, both of the wide receivers are gone and both of the edge players are here. Do they value those edge players higher? I don't think that's what it is. I just think Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack were more willing to take pay cuts and restructure their contract, because they both did, and Keenan Allen wasn't willing to. I mean, they maybe would have been able to keep all 3 of these guys if Keenan Allen did restructure that contract. But you also look at what Joe Hortiz said after this Keenan Allen trade. It gives them a lot of flexibility, and they need to be able to have depth and be a complete team. That is what he's saying here. The likelihood of keeping all of those guys and still having depth and being a complete team, it's just not realistic. And the Mike Williams cut, you know, it allows them to build that depth. But then again, you have so much money tied to 3 guys. They wanted every single one of them to take a pay cut. Keenan Allen just wasn't willing to do it. And it just so happened that Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack were. That's why they're on this team right now, and Keenan Allen isn't. But if they didn't take the pay cuts, we could have seen a scenario where all 3 of these guys were traded. Because he even said, you can keep punting money, but then you hurt your depth. You hurt your depth for signing quality depth pieces, and you hurt your flexibility going forward. Our goal is to be as flexible as we can every year. We've got a quarterback that makes a lot of money, and that's why you have to be cap conscious. So I think going forward, we're probably not going to see a bunch of guys getting big money like this, rather than having those star players like we're used to, like the Khalil Mack and Keenan Allen. We're going to see, I think, a little bit lesser of those players, you know, not star players, but some really, really good players. But we're going to have a lot more of them. Joe Hortiz was also asked about why it took so long for Keenan Allen to be traded, because it was on like day 3 or day 2 of free agency. And the answer to that is basically the new coaching staff coming in, and they needed time to evaluate this roster and basically place a value on what they had Keenan Allen and what they had for other guys and what they wanted at that position. And I guess they just came to the conclusion, like, look, we do not value Keenan Allen at this current cap number. Either he takes a pay cut or we just got to trade him. And now, speaking about trades, let's talk about possibly trading this 5th overall pick, because he was asked about this. We'll see how it goes. It's still early and the phone is not ringing yet because we're still a month or so out, but I have had teams ask me and they're gauging interest. Certainly, as I said before, I'm open to all options when it comes to the draft. I'm not locked into any one spot, forwards, backwards, or staying right there. So the possibility of trading up in the 1st round, I don't think that's possible. I think the most likely is that they trade down from that 5th spot, but also staying right there, like he said. Look, if the Cardinals trade out of 4 because the Vikings trade up to that spot, I don't think the Chargers are trading down. Not only because Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be there at 5, and that's going to be the pick if this scenario happens, but also because who would be the team trading up to that 5th spot? Would it be like the Jets trading up from 10th overall to 5th overall to try to get Marvin Harrison Jr.? If so, and that's the trade, then who would you go down to 10 for? And then what would you be getting in that package? Because if I'm going from 5th to 10 and I'm giving up Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm going to want a big package, almost as if you're trading up for a quarterback. And are the Jets going to be willing to give that up? I mean, they are kind of going all in with this Aaron Rodgers timeline right now. He's like 40 freaking years old, and he's already getting set up to run as a vice presidential candidate. But are they willing to give up what it would take to get Marvin Harrison Jr.? Because I would be putting a big tax on that pick in order to trade out from it. That is how highly I view Marvin Harrison Jr. I also would not rule out them trading down from that second round spot, because you look at a lot of the wide receivers and offensive linemen in this draft, specifically the tackles, there's going to be a big run on one of those positions late in the first round, and that's going to push the other position to be available at that top end of the second round. So we're the 5th pick at the top of day 2. There could be some other team that wants to trade up into that spot to get either one of the receivers that are falling or one of the offensive tackles. So those are the big takeaways from Joe Hortiz's press conference. And if you did not see my video yesterday, I talked about a bunch of the draft prospects that the Chargers are interested in.